Hello. Hi, everybody. So we're ready to get started. Welcome. Woo! So I'm Ziba Cranmer with JP Progressives. I'm going to tell you a little bit about JP Progressives. We're not as well known as our friends from the Boston chapter, but we are a grassroots organization here in JP. We organize around candidates and issues, around progressive candidates and issues here in JP. Tonight is an example of the type of work we do. We start with forums, and then we lead to endorsements. Usually we're in the back room of Doyle's or the First Baptist Church, so you guys have made us work a little harder tonight. And then we roll our sleeves up. So we knock on doors, we make phone calls, we send texts, and we mobilize around the folks that we endorse. So this is the first step in our endorsement process. And I just want to take a few minutes to acknowledge the JP Progressive Steering Committee and just ask if they could stand up right now. Thanks. And I just want to call out a few folks in particular. So just to give you a sense of how active we are here in JP, we're really proud of that. So Enid, where is Enid? Enid's here in the front row, and she leads our state action group. Enid led a group of volunteers that collected over 6,000 or 5,000 signatures for the Raise Up campaign, the Fight for 15, paid medical leave, etc. So that's one of our work streams, is to organize around issues, ballot initiatives, criminal justice reform, things like that. Nikki in the back leads our sister districts work, and that is about getting candidates elected in districts, in red districts, and try to make them blue across the country. And we have a really active group there. Last year, they made over 4,000 phone calls and sent over 10,000 texts. So these are the types of people you want behind you when you run for office. And then Annie and Ed lead our, in the back is Ed and Annie here in the front. They lead our local elections work, and that is for nights like tonight, our forums. And then we mobilize around those candidates. And our logo is a clipboard, and there's a good reason for that. The clipboard still rules even in this digital era. So that's JP Progressives. We have a whole bunch of upcoming events. I'm not going to go through them all, but this is just the first of many forums leading up to the fall 2018 elections. And don't forget that September 4th is primary day, right after Labor Day. And so be ready right after Labor Day to go to the polls, because that's a really important day and it's going to easily be missed. So we've got to spread the word. So tonight is the first step in our endorsement process, as I said, and we're really honored to be partnering with the Boston chapter of NAACP. Again, this is our third forum in the last, I think, 18 months. And it's been a great partnership, and I'll stop talking and turn it over to Tanisha.
Thank you, Ziba. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. First, I do want to thank JP Progressives. They are incredible partners in the work that we do as it relates to civic engagement and helping to educate our communities about issues that impact us most, whether we're talking about educational equity or economic justice or public safety. JP Progressives is an organization, actually the whole Progressives mass, right, Jonathan's here, have been, and West Roxbury, Roslindale Progressives. They've been outstanding partners to us in our work, and we're so fortunate to be able to join you tonight. I also want to thank Voter Choice Massachusetts, which Adam Friedman is here somewhere. He's running around as a co-partner in this work. And then Delta Sigma Theta, that is helping with our voter registration, which is particularly important right now. We don't want to take for granted that folks are registered to vote. I do want to take a moment to make a couple of acknowledgments. I do want to acknowledge members of our executive committee who are present. If you could just do a quick wave. Yes, thank you. I also want to acknowledge our New England area president, Juan Cofield, who's sitting here up front. I would like to acknowledge the elected officials who are present. I understand State Senator Sonia Chang Diaz is here. I see her in the back. State Representative Russell Holmes is here up front. I also want to acknowledge those candidates who are running for office. Katie Ford, Tori Turnbull, Nika Igula, Elugara, and Shagun Iduwu, who are here. Please stand. We're here tonight to meet 5 of the Suffolk County District Attorney hopefuls. But I do want to acknowledge any of those individuals out there who have stepped up to serve our communities through elected office, because that takes courage, it takes conviction, and a deep commitment to communities that not everyone has. So thank you so much for being candidates. For those who do not know, the NAACP is the oldest civil rights organization in the country. And here in Boston, we have the privilege, the distinction of being the oldest branch of the NAACP. Yes, that is something to clap about. And for well over 100 years, a cornerstone of our work has been in civic engagement, voting rights, and voting access. And so we're excited about this particular forum as well as the forums to come. You can expect from us consistent voter education during this campaign cycle. Voter registration, because again, we don't want to take for granted that folks are registered to vote. And third, voter mobilization. And as Ziba mentioned, September 4th is a very big day, and so we're going to be counting on many of you out there to join us as we're trying to mobilize the vote, join JP Progressives and other organizations as well. The right to vote, when it comes to the right to vote, there is no greater right that any of us has. But when it comes to exercising that right, there's no greater responsibility. And tonight starts that process. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to ask Tavares Brewington to come out. Tavares will be our lead moderator this evening. We're behind the curtain. Y'all like that? Tavares will get us started. Oh, and Representative Jeffrey Sanchez is here. Where is he? In the back. Thank you so much for being here, sir. We're going to turn it over to Tavares to introduce himself, as well as our additional moderators. Oh, we are live on BNN. So for those who couldn't make it in, BNN. We're also on Facebook Live, okay? So for those who can't be here, please get on Facebook and tweet so that others can be engaged. I also want to make one other comment. Tavares Brewington is our lead moderator. But for this particular forum, we thought it was very important that we give community an opportunity to participate in the moderation. And so many of you contributed to Slido. So the questions that you're going to hear asked today really come from us as a community. 1. 2, the co-moderators who will be joining Tavares were selected from among us. This is about us, we, the people. And so we're really excited that for this forum, we're really going to have our voice heard when it comes to these candidates. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. This is a very important event. At this time, I would like to invite the candidates to come out. And I would also like to invite my co-moderators to join us. So, my name is Tavares Brewington. A little bit about who I am. I'm a former federal prosecutor here in the District of Massachusetts, worked in Boston. I'm also a member of the Executive Committee of the Boston branch of the NAACP, and I'm a Suffolk resident. I'm joined here today by my co-moderators, as Tanisha mentioned. We have two community moderators and a youth moderator, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Tavashnik. I am a forensic psychologist. I work with youth and adults in the criminal justice system, and I also speak locally and nationally about topics at the intersection of law and mental health.
My name is Katora Brewster. I'm representing the I Have a Future movement, which is a statewide coalition. And we are focused on ending youth criminalization across the state and winning full youth employment. I've been involved for over 8 years in this work, proudly Dorchester native, and thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Kevin Kiyami, and I'm representing the Boston Student Advisory Council and Youth on Board. And I'm a BPS student and a Boston resident, and I'm also going to be a first-time voter this fall.
So before we get into the questions, I want to do a couple of things. First, I want to personally thank our candidates for raising their hands and stepping forward to be considered for a vitally important role in our community. A role that carries a tremendous amount of responsibility and pressure. And so I'd like to give them another round of applause. Next, I would like to talk about the ground rules for today's conversation. So we're going to give each candidate 2 minutes to introduce themselves. The introductions will happen in alphabetical order, from my right to left. After the introductions, we will ask questions. The questions will be rotated through or by moderators. I will start with a question, and the community moderators will have their question, and we will have a question from the youth moderator. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. We'll have a timekeeper in the front row who will give them signals as to how they're doing on time. If a candidate is mentioned directly in another candidate's response, we're going to give that the candidate that was mentioned 30 seconds to respond. Now, we're discouraging that because this event is not styled as a debate. It's really an opportunity for the community to get to know these candidates and what they personally believe their value is going to be to the office that they're seeking. As Tanisha mentioned, the questions that we're going to be asking tonight are a subset of questions that we've received from the community, and due to time limitations, we will not be able to accept questions from the audience. So with that, let's jump right into the questions. So the first question will be directed at Representative Carvalho. Introduction, I'm sorry. I'm excited. I'm ready to hear what they have to say.
Good evening. My name is Evandro Carvalho, and I'm running to be the next district attorney because I believe there is no public official that has greater impact on the lives of individuals of color and all families throughout the county than the district attorney's office. And too many families are suffering because of our broken criminal justice system that has led to mass incarceration, criminalization of the youth, and criminalization of mental health and addiction. We need to restore justice and fairness. I came to Dorchester when I was 15 years old, knowing no English. My mother, who's here today, worked 2 to 3 jobs just to put food on our table. Like many youth today, I struggle to stay out of trouble. But thanks to my mom and a teacher at Madison Park High School, Miss Baker, who got me to college, today I'm a proud grad of UMass Amherst and Howard University School of Law. After law school, I wanted to serve my community, so I came back to Roxbury and became a district ADA, as well as ADA in West Roxbury District Court and in Gun Court downtown. It is there that I saw how unjust, how unfair the system was. The people that look like me, families from my community cycling through the system. So, what did I do next? I ran for state representative to change the system. And that's exactly what I've been doing for the past 4 years. Okay? I've led the fight to end mass incarceration, to end youth criminalization, to end so many things that anchored and bothered my community from day one. But the fight is not over. I'm not done yet. We need to have the right people in the district attorney's office to make the right decisions for our people. We need a DA who knows the difference between a young man or a criminal who needs to go to prison and a young man who needs a second chance. I know I have the experience, the leadership, and the values to be the next district attorney. I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thank you for being here today.
Hello. My name is Linda Champion. I am an attorney. I'm a proud Korean African-American woman. I am a former prosecutor for the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, and I've been practicing in the community for about 15 years. I'm hoping that with this office, we can restore it back as a resource to the community, that we can focus all of our efforts on violent crimes and segregate those violent offenders from our community, and also focus on financial crimes. As you know, my mother came, or you may not know, but my mother came here as a Korean immigrant, and she came here in the early 70s. And so anything that impacts undocumented residents is something that is of great importance to me. And I want to sit and look at how we can deal with collateral consequences as they impact undocumented citizens. If we're going to, or undocumented residents, if we're going to call ourselves a sanctuary city, then I think that we need to take active steps and measures to make sure that those people that we know as neighbors and friends have the proper protections under the law. I'd also like to work with juveniles and young people. As a person who came here in my early teens and worked and did not have the support system of a family, I understand how important it is to have the proper support system and to make sure that we put our youth on a path to success and bring them out of a pipeline to prison. And I'm hoping to work hard for your vote to be the next Suffolk County District Attorney, and I jumped into this race so that I could stand up and be counted.
Good evening. My name is Greg Henning. I first want to thank the Jamaica Plain Progressives for putting on the forum, and the NAACP, the ACLU, and Boston English High School for hosting all of this. Also to Tavares and the other moderators, thank you very much for coming and spending your evening with us. I was born and raised in the city of Boston, and I've lived here virtually my entire life. I've also dedicated my career to serving the people of Suffolk County, and I've done that as a teacher and as a prosecutor, as well as a mentor. I've been a prosecutor in the district attorney's office for 10 years. I started prosecuting low-level misdemeanor cases, and my career has spanned all the way up to and including cases where individuals are charged with murder. I've done grand jury investigations. I've been the head of the gun prosecution task force, and when I left the office in order to do this run, I was the head of the gang unit. During the first portion of my career as a prosecutor, I also was working at a nonprofit after-school program in Dorchester. And between my time in the courtroom and my time doing that, I got a chance to see a lot of young people, particularly people from the inner city communities that we were dealing with, that were going through the criminal justice system. And so I decided to change my career, and I quit the DA's office and became a teacher. I taught 8th grade writing and 12th grade constitutional law at a school in Hyde Park called Boston Prep. And during my time as a teacher, I learned two really important points. The first, which one of my students here in the classroom, in the room can tell you, is that I was a terrible classroom teacher. The second point, though, is that I realized I can have a huge impact on young people in our community by being a prosecutor, but staying involved in the lives of young people. So when I returned to the DA's office, I became a mentor to many of the students that I was working with in the classroom, but also to former defendants and people that I had prosecuted. I am hopeful to become the district attorney of Suffolk County because I know that the role of a district attorney is more than just holding offenders accountable. It also means helping to lift up everybody in the community. And I know that if I'm elected, I will be able to use that vision to help improve everybody's life in Suffolk County. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Shannon McAuliffe, and I certainly never thought I would be sitting on a stage here, running for the office of District Attorney, in front of so many people hungry and passionate for change. I am honored to be your guest, so thank you very much. As we all know, the job of the District Attorney is to keep all of us safe. However, the classic approach of the war on crime, prosecuting at all costs, and mass incarceration, it hasn't only just failed us, it's cost billions of dollars, and it's made all of us less safe. And we've gotten into this mess because we've rewarded prosecutors for racking up convictions and pushing up sentences. And that's the culture and the core that needs to change, and why I'm running for District Attorney. I started my career in criminal justice in 1990 when I was working for a public defender interviewing people who had been in jail because they couldn't pay their bail. That was 1990, 28 years ago. In 1993, I went to Suffolk Law School. I then became a federal public defender where I represented undocumented immigrants. I then became a public defender here in Suffolk County, working in all 10 courts. I worked for 12 years as a public defender representing over 1,000 clients, and I saw day in and day out the systemic racism and injustice that happens in our courtrooms, and it simply must stop. 4 years ago, I became the director of ROCA, which is an amazing organization which takes and helps hardcore gang members change how they think, feel, and act to help them turn away from crime. I ran 2 sites. I used data every day to manage, and both sites went from underperforming to highly performing. And the ROCA young men in the system for 2 years or more, or at ROCA for 2 years or more, 79% had no arrests for any new offenses. Let me just close in saying that I made the decision to run against Dan Conley because I don't believe in waiting for justice. And I'm proud to say I'm the only person on this stage who didn't wait for a vacancy to run. And that's what I want you to see in me today. I don't run away from hard, I run toward hard. And when I do it over and over again, I've gained the experience, the skill, and the toughness to lead change. Leading change is who I am, and it's why I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Rollins, and I want to thank the sponsors of this event, but most importantly, all of you for caring to show up for this incredibly important forum about a really important position. I've been a lawyer for 21 years. Of those 21 years, I've been a prosecutor for 7 of them in state and federal courts. I've been a supervisor and manager of very large teams at times of over 150 people for 7 of those years as well. But I've been a leader my entire life. I'm the oldest of 5 children, and I have been fortunate enough to be an athlete. And as a woman, I believe that's very, very important. It teaches us strength and competition very early on. I played 3 sports in high school and was fortunate enough to get a full ride to go to college. And I was elected the captain of every team I've played on. I don't say that to show off. I tell you that because I went to a very prestigious, incredibly non-diverse high school. And to be elected by my peers, I believe it shows that I am capable of getting the best out of people. I work incredibly hard, and I know what teamwork is. As I've said, been a federal and a state prosecutor. I've worked as the general counsel of 3 of the largest state agencies in Massachusetts. And during that time, I've implemented massive cultural changes. Why do I want to be your DA? Because we are at a crossroads. We need a new lens looking at these problems. The elected officials have a criminal justice reform bill that is sweeping. And if you don't have somebody that can implement all of those changes into the DA's office, which has about 250 people, it will be for nothing. I hope to be that person for you, and I thank you for your time.
So now we get to ask the questions. So this question is directed at each candidate, but again, Representative Carvalho, you'll be the first to answer. And the question is, what experiences qualify you to effectively manage the District Attorney's Office, which comprises approximately 300 staff, 150 attorneys, and processes over 30,000 cases a year.
Thank you. I believe I have the leadership, the experience, and the values to be the next district attorney. Over the past 4 years, I have the pleasure of being a state representative, and just last week, we passed the most comprehensive criminal justice reform in the history of Massachusetts. And that was because of my leadership. I also spent time as a prosecutor in Roxbury District Court, in West Roxbury District Court, in the gun court downtown. And really, the personal touch and what I saw as an individual who still lives in Dorchester with my daughter and wife was present today, to see the violence, to see mass incarceration tearing my community apart, I believe that I have the experience to take and be the next district attorney.
At this time, based on 2017, the District Attorney's Office managed a budget somewhere between $21 and $22 million. The question that I have is, what was the allocation of those funds? In managing 300 staff and 150 attorneys, managing 150 attorneys is easy because attorneys are held to a certain standard and a certain bar that they have to abide by. In managing the 300 staff members, which is inclusive of the 150 attorneys, what I would say to that is I've been a manager my entire professional career. I started working at Suffolk University, where I managed the Bellotti Learning Center. More recently, I've created a pilot program with Urban Edge, which is Q Realty, and there I manage a staff of about 27, and I do all of that part-time and on the weekends. I'm able to work with families within the community, and I bring everyone from homelessness to home ownership, Section 8 to home ownership, and I work with various individuals within the community to provide mentorship opportunities as well as job training and programming.
The District Attorney's Office is comprised of many district courts and the Superior Court. The district courts obviously are spread out throughout the different parts of the county. I've supervised over the last year and a half one of the largest units in the entire District Attorney's Office, the gang unit. And that unit actually works with every single one of the district courts, because anytime a firearm case, a shooting case, or a case involving street violence happens in the county, those cases come to me. And I'm in charge of allocating our resources toward those cases, assigning prosecutors, working with the law enforcement officials to figure out how to best approach that case, and ultimately I supervise the people prosecuting those cases. I've also been a supervisor of the Gun Prosecution Task Force, and I guess I would note that being in charge of 3 classrooms of 30 8th graders gives me some management experience. Anybody who's a teacher, I think, would know that, so I count that as something that helps me manage a large group.
First of all, I was a public defender for 12 years in these courts. So I have the traditional legal experience that's needed to actually lead this office. You have to know what's happening in a courtroom. You have to know what goes well and what isn't going well. I then left and I went to the Kennedy School of Government, where I learned what law school didn't actually teach me, and that's what real change is about. Real change is about bringing all of the partners in a system together, looking at your failures, discussing your challenges, and then shoring up and going out and doing different to get different. I used the education that I got there to go and lead ROCA. I was a director at an innovative reform organization, and I believe there's a difference in leading an organization that is about the status quo and leading an organization that is about reform and change. I led teams there, I inspired, I held people accountable, and we got to results, and we have the data to prove it. That's what makes me qualified.
So I want to meet the 150 lawyers that's easy to supervise that you worked with. Yes. So the gang unit has 15 people in it. ROCA has 17 people that work there. And 300 staff is much different than 15 or 17. When I was the general counsel of MassDOT and the T, I oversaw over 150 very opinionated, highly opinionated, incredibly opinionated people. And they were lawyers, they were paraprofessionals, they were admins. We were in the midst of a massive cultural shift We went to shared systems where the Mass Department of Transportation and the MBTA had one general counsel for the first time in their history. I've led through cultural shifts and changes, and when I did my program at Harvard Business School, that was a wonderful piece of experience I got as well, and that will be helpful, I think, in changing this district attorney's office and implementing the criminal justice reform bill that's going to be passed. Thank you.
So, excuse me, audience, 2 points. If we can hold our applause to the end, and also because Attorney Champion was mentioned in a response, she has 30 seconds to respond.
The benefit that Greg, Ivandro, and I have is that we actually worked in the Suffolk County District Attorney's office, and I can assure you that the office that is there currently has a very talented level of professionals that are working on your behalf to fight for fair and equal justice. I've worked with them, I've watched them work tirelessly as professionals, coming into each session every single time and doing their duties in a congenial, professional manner.
Thank you.
This question is for you. Hello. Hi. Attorney Champion, this is for you. After I ask this question, it will go down to the rest of the candidates. So what provisions of the recently passed criminal justice bill do you support? And which of these don't? And what do you think is missing?
One of them.
No, use your own mic.
Okay. One of the provisions that I think is missing pursuant to Section 34 of that bill is they make a provision that says the mentally ill are included in pretrial diversion. They say that veterans are included in pretrial diversion. They also say that those people struggling with a substance abuse are included in automatic pretrial diversion. The thing I want to see added to that definition is that you young people under 21 are also included in that definition. It has to be automatic. The thing that I see that I like, and remember, with that particular bill, only 9 of 11 district attorneys signed off on that bill. But one of the provisions of the bill that I think is very interesting, and the current district attorney gets it right, when you start talking about drugs and drug dealing, particularly within a school zone, you will note within that section that they've made some changes. Dan Connolly supported the changes, others didn't support the changes. The reason we have to support those changes in more dense areas is because there's a school everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I want to make my position on this extremely clear in case there was any confusion. If I were a legislator, I would support this bill and vote for it. However, as a candidate for district attorney, I feel like if I'm asked if there's any problems with the bill, I do need to point some out. So first, the parts of the bill that I would point out, just a handful that I am strongly in support of, is eliminating mandatory minimums for low-level drug offenses and eliminating some of the obstacles for youth, particularly individuals who have been in custody, getting employment. And what I'm talking about is people who have expunged or sealed records, having that used against them for employment or housing in the future. That's something I've dealt with some of the young men that I've worked with who have been in custody, because it's a huge obstacle to getting a job or to getting financial aid or employment. I also think that it's important to point out that the bill doesn't address recidivism in the most opportune way. And City Councilor Andrea Campbell actually commented on this, that there aren't any funds in the bill, there aren't any allocation of resources to help people who are re-entering society from custody. And the biggest issue I've dealt with when I have young men coming out of custody and I'm working with them is finding them gainful employment. That's essential, and that's an area that's missing in the bill.
Thank you. I agree with Greg. What's missing from the bill is the justice reinvestment that wasn't actually passed. In Massachusetts, we spend about $90,000 in reentry services. Other states spend hundreds of millions of dollars in it. If we are incarcerating people and they're coming out, they certainly need the services to shore up, strengthen up, and be able to live a life that they all deserve. So $90,000 simply isn't going to cut it, and I would have liked to have seen that in the bill. What else I do not agree in the bill is the mandatory minimums for Class A drugs. I understand that we have an opioid crisis. I understand the fear, but we've been down this road before. It simply doesn't work. If jail could be the solution to drug addiction, that would be great, but it isn't. It's a much more complex problem. I think what mandatory minimums do is they give us a false sense of security. We end up wasting tons of money, and it turns us away from the smart, innovative solutions that we need to be looking at, such as new treatment. Sorry, see, it stops. I'll stop. Thank you.
Some of the things I really like about the bill are that they focus on women, which nobody ever talks about. I understand jail is not fun for anyone, and young men have terrible, issues with jail. However, it's not a positive place for women either. So the fact that we have requirements now that judges have to make findings before imposing a sentence of incarceration of primary caretakers of children, that is very, very important. The vast majority of those individuals are women. Similarly to everything, and I will let it get us back on time, is that I agree with what Shannon and Greg said. We need more money with reentry. We're not doing enough. It's ridiculous that there are people currently serving time, working jobs, and getting paid while incarcerated. When they get out and apply for those same jobs, they won't be able to get them because they have a felony. It's ridiculous and it needs to stop.
I am the only candidate up here that has been working to fix this broken system that everyone is talking about. I filed the bill to repeal mandatory minimums for nonviolent drug offenses. I filed the bill to raise the age of criminal responsibility. I filed the bill to expunge records of juvenile. And in fact, I'm going to be putting in a budget $5 million to do the reentry that they speak about. Community-based reentry for people coming out of jails. I am the only person on this stage with a record of service to the criminal justice system, and I'm looking forward to taking it to the next level and implement some of the things I've been working on. The one thing that I wish we had done is raise the age to 19, 20, 21 to include juveniles in that system. I've been doing this stuff. I'm the one that's about reform. All they can talk about is what I've been doing for the past 4 years.
Again, before we move into the next question, I would just ask the audience to hold the applause. And yes, I do think that it's appropriate to allow each candidate 30 seconds to respond to Representative Cavallo's response.
Passionate up here, huh? You've gone through. I would disagree. I think everyone on this stage is passionate about criminal justice reform. I think that there are things about the bill. It's a massive bill. It's very complicated. We have to look at each of the sections and how each section applies. I think all of us care about children. All of us care about improving the quality of life for people, and all of us care about mass incarceration and stopping anything that involves recidivism. We don't want to see people prosecuted and then come out of serving their time and not having a job or a home to go back to.
I'm going to let my record of service to the Suffolk County community and to the criminal justice system speak for itself.
I agree. I believe that filing legislation is very important, but being on the front lines, fighting against injustice for 28 years in courtrooms day in and day out, and leading innovative reform efforts like ROCA is also working for reform and more in line with the skills that are needed to actually lead transformational change in a DA's office.
What I will say is, first and foremost, I see Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, who did quite a bit of wonderful work on that criminal justice reform bill, and I've seen her name mentioned many, many times in the newspaper with respect to all the work she did. I will say that I have, similarly in my role as the chair of legal redress at the NAACP, worked very hard on criminal justice reform. I receive calls about it daily. I advise the Attorney General on that, and I will let my record stand on that as well.
Attorney Henning. I have a question about racial justice. The incarceration rate in Massachusetts is 8 times greater for Black residents than for white residents, and approximately 5 times greater for Latinos. What steps would you take to address racial disparities in prosecution, sentencing, and incarceration?
Thank you for the question. This is one of those that can't really effectively be answered in 1 minute, but I'm going to try. The first thing is the incarceration rate. I think to target that, the biggest thing to do is incarcerating fewer people is the goal. And the way to do that is to use pretrial diversion and other diversion programs before an individual becomes incarcerated. And that starts very young. It's one of the reasons I wanted to become a teacher and why I went into mentoring younger people. If we can bring people who would normally enter the court system and work with them through community organizations or big brothers or mentors or teachers who are involved in their lives, we can prevent them from ever becoming a part of the criminal justice system. That means having prosecutors who are willing to take a role outside of the courtroom, and that's what I've been doing for my career, because prosecutors are not supposed to just stay in the courtroom. Nowadays, we need to take an active role in schools, which I've been doing through the Overcoming Violence program and speaking at Boston Public Schools, and we need to take an active involvement in community organizations that will help support an individual that might be placed in probation or might be in a pretrial diversion state, so that those people who are working with them know that even the individuals in charge of applying the law want to see them succeed, because we don't want to incarcerate more people. We want to incarcerate fewer, and we want to see them succeed.
In the last federal census, 40% of the residents of Suffolk County were Black or Latino. And when you look at the 18 to 24-year-old cohort that is incarcerated in Suffolk County, 84% are persons of color. It's not that everyone wants to incarcerate only Black and brown people, but that's what we're doing. I will take 4 immediate steps. First, work on increasing diversity in the office. 2, implement meaningful implicit bias training. 3, start changing the culture from one of a scorecard mentality to actually practicing fairness in prosecution. And 4, begin to collect data to meaningfully address meaningfully address the systemic racism that's playing out in the courtrooms every single day. Thank you.
Yeah, we have prosecutors that don't look like the people that are prosecuted, period. And we have police officers that don't look like the people they're policing. And we need to do better. And I'm tired of hearing people say, we're gonna have a study that we don't need any studies. Walk outside, look at police officers, look at all the people holding signs for certain people on this panel. They don't look like the people that they're prosecuting. And as a person of color, a visible person of color, and a former president of the Mass Black Lawyers Association, with friends in Latinx communities and other communities that are over-policed and over-prosecuted, I can assure you I will make a change in that office immediately. Thank you.
Mass incarceration and the disparities that exist within the system is tearing our communities apart. Just last month, I went to one of the prisons, state prisons, and had to hold back tears because what I saw was Black men, brown men that looked like me in prison. Intelligent people that could have had a second chance. So for the past 4 years, that's what I've been doing, trying to change the system to make sure that people that look like me do not go to prison. When I become DA, I'm going to reevaluate all mandatory minimums. I'm going to assess the plea agreements policies. I'm going to assess the sentencing policies. I'm going to make sure that people that look like me are in the DA's office prosecuting, and people from the community like I am. So for me, this is a matter of life and death. That's the reason we see young men killing each other in our communities, because they don't have role models because of mass incarceration. And I'm ready to be the next DA. Thank you.
If you want to deal with racial disparities in the criminal justice system, then I think we have to have a real serious talk about race and the criminal justice system. So oftentimes you guys separate the two. You want to talk about the criminal justice system, but you don't want to talk about the underlying prejudices and biases that exist within the system. So here's what you have to do. From 2009 to 2015, Suffolk County detained 35,000 people on pretrial detention. Do you know what that means? That means they sat in jail waiting for a determination as to whether or not they were guilty of the crime charged. One of the things we have to do if you want to balance out the interest is we cannot keep people in jail before they are convicted. The worst thing you could ever do is take away someone's freedom when they are innocent. If you want to work on how we can take the approach, there is no blame. So we don't blame the cops, we don't blame the community, we don't blame the prosecutors. What we have to do is take a proactive approach to crime, and we have to do that through crime prevention. We have to educate the community, we have to educate our children, and we have to make the Office of the District Attorney accessible to all residents.
Beginning with Attorney McAuliffe. Undocumented immigrants involved with the criminal justice system are more liable for deportation under the Trump administration and the work of Immigration's Customs Enforcement. Can we count on you to not cooperate with ICE? And what other steps will you take to protect undocumented immigrants?
You can count on me, for certain. I think this is one of the saddest moments in modern American history. The notion that somebody's status would have anything to do with how a DA would treat a defendant, a victim, or a witness is simply offensive to me. I began my career as a federal defender, and I sat in courtrooms next to undocumented immigrants whose lives were torn apart by the federal prosecutor sitting on the other side of that courtroom. I will take a stand here that I will always protect all victims, regardless of zip code, income, color of your skin, ethnicity, religion, gender identity, or immigration status. Sorry, I thought you were done. I'm done, thank you.
That was it. You can go, I'll give you a couple of seconds. You good? All right. So I believe that by having, by threatening deportation of people does not help keep our communities safe, right? So we need everyone in our community to feel comfortable reporting crimes, feel comfortable testifying about things that happen in their community, being witnesses. If they're victims, we want them to come forward. So even for me, even though there are only 2 of our 4 communities that are sanctuary cities, I believe Boston and Revere, I will absolutely protect the residents of Suffolk County with respect to their status, with the hope of getting our community more involved in the criminal justice system in a positive way, reporting crimes, being witnesses, and coming forward to help make our community safer.
I am an immigrant. I live in Dorchester and Uplands Corner among immigrants. I hear their stories. I know they're hiding. They call my office when they have to check in with the immigration officers. What the team you're gonna hear tonight is that I've been living this stuff. I understand what's going on and what needs to be done. I was the lead file of the Safe Communities Act, and now we're still trying to push. I've been fighting for all of us, and as the next DA, I will continue to do those same things. Again, the team you will find is that I live in this community, and I understand the issues that all of us are facing. So as the next DA, yes, because I've been dealing with parents, and I've seen parents being pulled away from their children, so I understand what's going on. And I will be at the front line, as I have been, to make sure that Trump and his administration do not rip our families and our communities apart. Thank you.
I think that if you want to help undocumented residents, and I call them citizens because they are here and they are law-abiding and they pay their taxes, a lot of them that I know file tax returns. You want to help them, you get the U visa form out, you fill it out, you bring it to me, I want to sign it. If we're truly going to be a sanctuary city, then we have to protect the people that live within the community. Boston is a sanctuary city. Chelsea is a sanctuary city. Revere is a sanctuary city. You have to look to protect the people. If you want them to see something, say something. It is not enough for us to continue to tell them, come forward, we will protect you. What protection do you offer them? You have the ability, the police department has the ability to fill out and complete a U visa application for those residents to protect them from deportation and the district attorney's office, if they choose to use them as a witness, also has that ability. We have the tools necessary that we can protect them against federal deportation. And we need to take the stand and use it and stop hiding behind the fact that we're a sanctuary city with nothing to back it up.
The policy that you're talking about, the president's policy, is a disgrace because it makes our community less safe. And the way it does that is it makes witnesses and victims less likely and less interested in coming to court because they're worried about what's going to happen at the steps of the courthouse. And what Linda's talking about is absolutely true. There are times where the district attorney's office can work with a witness or a victim to help fill out a U visa application. And that's something that I have done in cases in the past. But more importantly to your question, yes, when those witnesses and victims come to us and say, I've been harmed or I've seen something happen, we're not asking about their immigration status, and I don't do that because it's not appropriate. Our job in the district attorney's office is to make sure that the community is safe and to prosecute a case regardless of who the victim or the witness is. And that's what we tell them when they come, and that's what I would do if I were district attorney. Because the immigration status of an individual should play no role whatsoever in whether or not they get treated fairly by the court system.
The next question is directed at, obviously, all the candidates, but first at Attorney Rollins. It's a three-part question. Do you believe that there are systemic pressures in our system that cause people who may be innocent to plead guilty? If you believe so, what are those pressures? And if elected, what would you do to alleviate them?
1, yes. 2, we overcharge people, right? So what happens is, as prosecutors, we are brought individuals and we overcharge them with crimes, and then we leverage those overcharges to essentially close our fingers around their throats and take a plea bargain, right? And so what we need to do is work on making better charging decisions. What was part 3?
What would you do to alleviate the pressures?
3, I would make sure, when we implement a lot of these changes, hopefully when the governor approves the bill, we will be making sure that we are making better charging decisions. We're not going to be overcharging people with crimes. I think the policy currently is to charge with as many things as we can, as opposed to the crime that was actually committed and not leveraging that situation.
The criminal justice system, the way it's designed now, particularly for brown and black people, it forces people to plead guilty. When you walk into a courtroom, I'm a former prosecutor, and they used to confuse me with the defendant. Sometimes I wouldn't even be allowed into the other side if they didn't know who I was. When you walk into a courtroom, there's already pressure to plead because you see no one that looks like you, other than the other guys that are sitting next to you in the back. So diversity and inclusion and cultural competence is critical to advance this issue. Also, specifically, I, as a state rep, have been fighting for this. One thing that some of my colleagues mentioned is the school zone. We'll get a little technical. The school zone has been a tool to incarcerate black men and brown men. And I took the leadership, even though it's a politically risky thing to do, to say we need to make it better. We need to streamline it.
I think, for me, anyone charged with a crime, there's a lot of stress and pressure that goes with that. And anytime you are facing a difficult situation, I think, in your own life, when you're trying to balance out the interests or what's best for you. People may do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do when they're under pressure. I think that we have to be clear that the Office of the District Attorney does not necessarily charge the crimes. We're not the individuals going out and writing up police reports and submitting them. But our only job is to seek truth and to seek justice. And our job is to be the voice for the victim if it's a victim involved in the offense. And we have to provide access to equal and fair justice. And that is difficult, but the way you balance it is the district attorney's office has to allow the defense attorney to be able to communicate the information that you need about the defendant in order to make a fair and accurate assessment of the charges before the court.
So to talk about the pressure that you're describing, yes, it exists. Part of it is because of the bottleneck that's created in the system. Right now, if you think about Suffolk County, you have 25 to 30,000 cases a year. There's not enough courtrooms or days in the week or prosecutors or defense attorneys to try all those cases. So the bottleneck exists. And part of what I was talking about before about reducing the number of cases we're actually bringing into the courtroom, that's one way to help alleviate that. The second thing when we're talking about these pressures is there's a difference between what we're discussing where people enter into plea negotiations and cases where there's claims of actual innocence. And those are ones where a working relationship between defense counsel and the prosecutors is essential. And that's something I think I've cultivated over the course of my career. I think back to a case where in district court, the attorney grabbed me and said, I want to talk to you in your office about this. This is different. It was a young man who was charged with beating an individual on some train tracks. And the person who'd identified him basically pointed out and said it's one of those three black guys and then identified him. Now this individual had a claim of actual innocence and we figured out that he'd been misidentified. And because we did that, he went on to being able to apply and get a career as a Boston police officer. That's because with a working relationship with the defense counsel and with our office, I think we are able to cultivate that relationship to identify those cases.
So this is what happens in the prosecutor's office. They've become experts at stacking up the odds at every single pressure point to ensure that people are more likely to plead guilty. And it happens every day, and it happened every day when I was a defense attorney. It begins with charging and overcharging to put people in a position where they're scared to exercise their rights. The second part is when they ask for a very high bail, knowing that the judge will probably split the baby and it will be said it's something that the defendant can't actually pay. They're then in jail, and when you're in jail, you're much more likely to take that deal when they're offering it to you. You've been in jail for a year, and they say, we'll give you a year, take it. People then plead guilty. The other part that happens where the pressure is when you want to exercise your rights and go to trial. You can go to trial, but if you do, I'm going to ask for 10 years. If you don't go to trial, I'll give you that year, and people then plead guilty. So yes, I do agree that the odds are stacked up against them, and it needs to change.
So thank you for the responses. The next question is directed initially to Representative Carvalho. What policies would you implement to improve public safety, in particular, to protect victims and witnesses?
Witness intimidation is probably one of the most influential ways that we do not solve our crimes in our community, because people are afraid to come forward. When I became a state representative, one of the first things I did, particularly when we were discussing cold cases within the city of Boston, particularly in our communities and how they have not been resolved, is to increase funding for witness protection. So for me, the ability to protect witnesses and victims and sometimes survivors of homicide.
So again, I'll restate the question again with Representative Carvalho. And the question was, what policies would you implement to improve public safety, in particular, protecting victims and witnesses?
Glad we're back. Hopefully the young woman is getting well. As I was saying, the rights and the ability of victims and witnesses and even survivors of homicide to be dealt with in a matter of respect, in a matter of accountability, in a matter of transparency is critical to our system. For me, for the past 4 years, I've been fighting for those rights. Particularly, as I mentioned, witness intimidation is a critical issue for our communities, and I was able to increase funding to make sure that assistant district attorneys are able to relocate a witness or take care of them in some capacity if need be. Just last 6 months ago, I filed a bill on behalf of Odin Lloyd's mother, Miss Ursula Ward, because of what happened to her son. Because as we know, her son's conviction, the murder of her son's conviction went away because he committed suicide. I filed a bill to make sure that she's taken care of, to make sure that other families do not have to deal with this. So, but their rights are critical to the system.
Thank you. Unfortunately for me, in 2012, I was actually a witness to a murder that occurred in Roxbury. And I watched, a young man take his last breath. And I remember having to go down to homicide to give a statement. And at the end of the interview, they handed me a piece of paper and told me that I needed to write my name and my home address down, and that they would be in touch with me. And I can tell you that for me, that was really a scary experience. And the stress that you feel in watching someone fight for their life, and then learning later that they've lost their life with no support, no information, no one to counsel you or talk to you. One thing I want people to understand and remember, that incarceration and crime don't necessarily correlate. Crime comes about through trauma, and we have to help witnesses and victims deal with the trauma that they face when they find themselves in these situations.
I've had to work on homicide cases where witnesses won't come forward or are unwilling to come forward because of the threat of intimidation. So, two specific things that we can do. One is when witnesses or people who are witnesses to crimes talk to police, I would support legislation that would keep their contact information and their name and date of birth out of police reports. Because one of the issues that happens is a person reports something to the police, but because of certain rights and certain ways that the system works, an individual who's charged with a crime immediately has access to the information. I would support legislation that would help protect witnesses and victims of violent crimes. Second, we have all of this housing going up in high-rises across the city. The problem that we have with witness relocation and witness protection is, even in cases where a witness approaches us and says, I want to cooperate, but I need to be moved for whatever reason, there aren't places to bring witnesses. There is such a tight glut of housing and a waiting list to get into subsidized housing that we can't just move a witness automatically to bring them there. They end up in a hotel oftentimes. So I would support legislation that would help allocate specific housing so that we could go with a witness immediately when that witness needs to be relocated.
I believe this is not a quick fix. We have a real problem with trust with the DA's office and the police department with victims and witnesses. I think this begins with respecting people and respecting what they've been through. Actually listening to victims and witnesses when they have been the victim of a crime, going out and giving them trauma services, seeing them, hearing them, making them feel valued, not just turning to them when you need their testimony at that moment, but having a longer relationship where you can build trust and you can stand side by side them and help them come into a courtroom and testify even when that's really scary. When I was reading the paper about a young man who had been murdered over Easter weekend, and the mother had called down and asked if it was her son, and they said because it was an investigation, and I don't know if this was the DA's office or the police department, they had her identify his body by a picture, and he was still in a body bag. And I thought to myself, if I were a victim or a witness, I don't know that I would trust the system either. It's about respect.
So in Suffolk County, the victims are often later defendants, or defendants are often victims, right? So it's the same people that keep going through the process. And to piggyback a little bit on what Shannon said is, as the chair of legal redress for the NAACP, ACP, I receive calls from the community all the time. There is not a good relationship between the police and often many of the communities of color in Suffolk County. They don't trust the district attorney's office. They don't trust the police. They feel as though they're over-policed and over-prosecuted. And we can all talk up here about the things we'd like to do. It's been this way for a very long time. We need a new lens looking at these problems. We need somebody in this role that doesn't only look at certain communities as, I know you, I've defended you, you're a criminal. I know you, you're a gang member, I prosecuted you, and then I mentored you later. We need people that look at this community and say, I know you, you're my neighbor. Our children run track together. We work side by side. We need a new lens on this problem.
Attorney Champion, how would you address individuals with mental health issues? Moderator?
Yeah, we'll give you 30 seconds to respond.
Hello? That last comment I think might have been directed at me, so all I would say is, in terms of my lens and the lens that I would bring to the district attorney's office, I think my record speaks for itself, and the people that know me and have worked with me in school and in the courtrooms know that as well. And as for looking at people around the neighborhood and saying, you're my neighbor, I have lived in and continue to live in Suffolk County, and I will continue to serve the county.
Attorney Champion, how would you address individuals with mental health issues in the criminal justice system?
Individuals with mental health issues shouldn't be in the criminal justice system, so that's one issue. So to the extent someone is in need of services and treatment, we have to make sure they get the necessary services and treatment. Oftentimes what we do is when they come in for arraignment, if they're evaluated, and if a determination is made that they're unfit to stand trial, right, then sometimes what people do is they wait around. They wait to see if you get better, wait to see if you can at some point stand trial. My issue with anyone who is brought into the criminal justice system, sometimes mental health issues go undiagnosed. And so one of the things we have to do is we have to be able to listen to people in the community, people who know different individuals, to bring information so that we can make just and fair decisions. We're dealing with people's lives. This isn't, people have said things like prosecutors will, in Suffolk County, just do things with a broad stroke, but we don't. We do take the lives of each person before us very seriously.
This is unfortunately a money issue, and the Trump administration cutting spending in health care for mental health issues is part of the problem, but it's always been a problem in Suffolk County. I think back to the beginning when I was a prosecutor in the Central Division, downtown at BMC, and then as a Superior Court prosecutor, the same single health care provider does evaluations for those two courthouses. And if you needed to have somebody evaluated for mental health issues in Superior Court, you might have to wait for the entire day to elapse until he finished his time down in the Central Division. That can't happen. You can't have one doctor covering two huge courthouses downtown. And that's just a symbol of what the system that we have right now is doing. So this is an allocation of resources and monetary problem. If you want to effectively cover all the district courthouses plus Superior Court, you need mental health professionals to do that so that we're not using bail or temporary housing in the facilities to address the lack of mental health professionals who can evaluate those people coming into the courthouse.
I think we all agree that that the system doesn't adequately deal or solve the problem of mental health. And that's the easy answer. But what happens is a lot of people who are suffering from mental health issues actually commit violent crimes. And the question is then, what does the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office do? And that's where things get stickier, right? When I was a defense attorney, I represented a young woman who had gotten into a pretty bad fight with a bus driver. And we got her out on bail and we got her into a really good program. A year later, when she was on her medication and doing well, the DA came to me and said, she needs to do 6 months in jail. And I said, but no, she's doing well now, she's on her medication. And the DA said, I want her to do 6 months in jail, and if she doesn't agree to that, we'll go to trial and I'll ask for more time and I'll get it. She pled guilty, she got 6 months in jail, she lost her housing, her program, her stability, and we all became less safe. So it's about being smarter when not just the clear picture of mental health shows up in front of you, but when it's rolled in with a crime and determining how you lift that person up and out to make us all safer.
Yeah, that was probably one of my bus drivers when I was at the T that she attacked. But what's interesting is we have to think about victims, right? So it is a sticky issue because it's important to make sure that victims are feeling as though the DA's office is focused on community safety and justice for them. So we have to make sure that when we're making determinations with respect to mental health issues, yes, the prisons are becoming new asylums, but we need to think really clearly and make sure victims are getting what it is they think is just in the system as well. So I agree with Shannon, it's a very complicated issue and there's not an easy answer there, but I do believe we need to make sure that individuals with mental health issues are getting treatment rather than sentencing in time.
70% of individuals in Suffolk County jails are dealing with some sort of mental health issue. Those individuals did not be in jail because when they're in jail, they're not getting treatment. So to me, particularly dealing with people with mental health issue as well as substance abuse issues, addictions, it's about diverting them from jails, particularly being held without bail. Often they just stay there. When they come back, they just be shipped back and they commit a crime and so on. So it's a cycling that's going on within our system. So for me, a couple things that I think could happen immediately, which is funding for expansion of mental health court. And I have relationships on Beacon Hill. I will be pushing for more funding, for more beds, for treatment, instead of making sure that individuals do not go to jail. The other thing that we can do also is educate and train the ADAs that are dealing with these individuals on a daily basis. I can assure you that that needs to happen more. And when I was there, that was not happening on a daily basis.
So thank you. We have time for one more question. And after that question and the answers, we'll move into closing statements.
Beginning with Attorney Henning. Would you treat young adults between the ages of 18 to 25 differently in light of growing neuroscience research indicating that our brains are not fully developed until the age of 25, and in light of environmental and developmental factors that can affect decision-making in that age range?
Yes, absolutely. Being in a classroom, I've seen the difference between a 14-year-old and a 21-year-old, and there's a clear difference in the way that people think, and also the difference in the way that adults make decisions and their behavior. So I would absolutely treat young adults differently. One of the things I was working on in the district attorney's office, and I was really pleased to see this was part of the criminal justice reform bill, is that the legislature strongly encouraged Department of Corrections and detention facilities to house young adults in different areas than adults. That is hugely important because it helps to make sure that those young adults who may not end up back in the system or who may not be affected by people who have been in the system, it ensures that those individuals, the young adults, are going to have a second chance when they get out of detention, whenever that may be. So I would definitely treat it differently. There has been discussions between the trial court, the district attorney's office, and the defense bar about setting up a young adults session, much like mental health court and veterans court. And I would absolutely be interested in having further discussions with the trial court about that, because that may be something of value as well.
So the answer here is not housing our children who are emerging adults in a jail in a section that's a little bit better. This is about not having them go into the system and not having them in jail. A cutoff of 18 doesn't make any sense. 18 to 24-year-olds represent 10% of our population and 29% of our arrests. These are the young men that are committing a lot of the crime in Suffolk County, and we need to figure out how to deal with them differently so we can lift them up and out until they stop committing crimes. The brain is such that you're very impulsive, so you can't be judged or held accountable to the same extent as an older adult, but also what it means is that you're much more likely to be rehabilitated. And you're also much more likely to be hurt by jail. So yes, I do support it, and I think we need to do everything to keep our children out of jails.
support it as well, and I believe it also applies to women that are incarcerated and I feel are often forgotten in this conversation. I believe Middlesex County Middlesex actually has a housing unit for young adults there, and I hope that the Suffolk County House of Corrections is going to follow shortly, and the sheriff is going to do that as well. But I support it wholeheartedly.
Dealing with youth has been the most important thing in my career as a legislator. Most of the policies that I've been focusing on has been how do I improve lives of youth to make sure that we stop the school to prison pipeline, to make sure that our children are not dropping out of high school like they have been, which is again why I am the lead filer for the raising the age bill that today hopefully is going to pass soon. And one of the things that I'm proud that it's in there is one that, yes, the Sheriff's Department will be encouraged to have a unit for young people particularly. But I'm hoping that over the next few years, we will change the law to raise the age further than what it is right now, which is 18. Thank you.
So I don't agree. I think that once you hit 18, you are an adult. And I'm a mother. I have a 16-and-a-half-year-old. She knows right from wrong. What I would be willing to do is maybe look at a staircase approach to how we handle 18 to 25-year-olds. But at the end of the day, it depends upon the offense that is committed. If you commit an offense as an 18 plus and you want to rely on the fact that your brain is not properly formed to know right from wrong, then I want to go and have a talk with your mother. Because I think we teach our children as mothers right from wrong. The question then is, if you make a mistake as a child, are you entitled to a second chance? Absolutely. Everyone is entitled to a second chance. We all make mistakes. We all are imperfect. No one in this room can stand right now and say that you are perfect. Everyone is entitled to a second chance regardless of the mistake that they make. But if they make a mistake that requires segregation from society, then we have to, as district attorneys, put them in jail. That is the reality.
So at this time in the program, we're going to move to closing statements. And as I indicated earlier, we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order, starting with Attorney Rollins. 2 minutes.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I want to just reiterate the fact that I'm really appreciative that you are all this excited about this position. It is an incredibly powerful position. I believe that I'm the most qualified person to be the next Suffolk County District Attorney because I've actually managed and supervised incredibly large groups of people. As the moderator has said, there are 250 to 300 individuals in this office. You have all spoken with respect to your presence here and understanding that we are moving toward reform. The electeds have a sweeping criminal justice reform bill that we hope the governor will sign, and implementation matters. What's not going to happen is the bill is passed and becomes a law and we throw it at the people in the Suffolk County DA's office and say, go ahead now, do this. We need policies and procedures in place and we need to shift the culture within the office. I have done that in my role as Chief Legal Counsel at 3 of the largest state agencies in the Commonwealth. In addition, I've been a federal prosecutor and a state prosecutor for 7 years. I have handled many different types of cases, criminal and civil. I've also run large groups, as I said to you earlier. As a prosecutor, a criminal defense attorney, and somebody who has sat in a courtroom with a family member who has been in and out of the criminal justice system, I have a lens that can look at these issues very, very differently than most of the people at on this panel. I thank you for your time. I look forward to telling you more about myself, and I hope to get your support.
So we are all here on the stage, and you're all spending your Monday night with us because we agree on one undisputed fact, and that is that the system needs fundamental change. I believe that I have the exact kind of experience needed to lead transformational change in this office. I have chosen in my career to enter hard, tough, challenging lanes time and time again. And I do it for one reason and one reason only. I do it because I see injustice, I put my head down, and I go in to change it. I led change as a veteran defense attorney, standing up against injustice every day for 12 years, well before it was chic and fashionable. I led change on the front lines of reform as a director at ROCA, where we relentlessly went after hardcore gang members, not to lock them up, but to help them rehabilitate and lift them up and out of the system, because that's what makes us safe. And I led change as a candidate by being the first one to challenge Dan Conley. And that's really what's at stake in this race. It's needing a district attorney who's going to lead change and who's going to promote justice. And certainly this can be an office that's a stepping stone, a political stepping stone, but we don't really have time for political games when thousands of lives are at stake. What I can tell you is that I will put justice first. That is what I am. That is what I have done. It's what I will always do, and it's what I will do as your district attorney. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and again, thank you to the JP Progressives and the NAACP and the ACLU for hosting the event, and to Boston English High School for having us all here. The job of district attorney is first and foremost public safety and to make sure to protect the members of the community, but it also means reaching out to the community to restore, if there is any lost trust, that lost trust with each and every part of the community. And having been involved in this system and been a resident and also a contributor to Suffolk County for over 10 years, I see that there is a lack of trust between portions of the community and law enforcement. And I recognize that both in my personal life and what I've done switching careers and working with individuals that I've prosecuted, but also in my professional life, because you have to work with judges and jurors, witnesses and victims, law enforcement people, and members of the community. And that's what I've committed myself to doing over the past 10 years. And it's why I am making a commitment to the members of Suffolk County and the people in this county by running for district attorney. It's the only job I will ever run for. I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant who wants this position because I know I can contribute to and change Suffolk County and the people here to make it safe and also to help restore lost trust with members of the community. I look forward to the opportunity to talk with you over the next few months, and I ask for your support on September 4th. Thank you.
So again, my name is Linda Champion. I don't consider myself a public servant. I consider myself a community servant. I've served the community daily for the last 20-something years of my life here. And I take great pride in the fact that I work with the seniors, I work with persons with disabilities, I work with people who are in need of housing and services. I work constantly with the homeless population to determine how we can get them into housing. I think that it's very important that we take a look at the economic factors that bring about crime, and I think that we need to create opportunities for individuals to regain their livelihood and rejoin the workforce. You want to fix the system? Create jobs. For those employers here, create jobs and opportunities. You want to stabilize the community? Create programs that provide down payment assistance so that people can buy and invest in the communities in which they live and work. It breaks my heart to see public servants like firefighters, police officers, teachers unable to find housing to be able to work and live in the cities in which they serve. The other thing is we have to get smart on crime. If we want to fix things, we got to be smart about it. And the only way we can get smart about it is if we start working proactively, not reactively. And also, we need to start teaching our young men and women about their rights as it relates to the criminal justice system. Their first encounter should never be with that police officer investigating a crime. Their first encounter should be with all of us going into the schools at a very young age and working with them and educating them so that they don't have a fear or a distrust of the people who are hired to protect and serve them. We need to start bridging relationships and stop placing blame on who's doing what and who's doing this wrong. We need to extend a hand and build partnerships so that we can help each other get better, be better, and grow. If we want to see changes come about, we need to work and focus on our youth. I would hope to meet all of you personally. I ask that you go to www.championforda.com and learn more about my story. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for being here today. Today has shown us that we need transformation in the district attorney's office. We need a district attorney that will keep all of us safe, but yet work to restore justice and end mass incarceration. We need a district attorney from this community with a record of serving our communities. I grew up in Dorchester, and I still live there with my daughter and wife who's present today. We live in a neighborhood where we see violence outside our windows. Again, my daughter's sleeping in the next apartment. Rewind. Next bedroom, okay? So I know what it is to live in a community where you feel like you need protection from violence. But we are beyond that. We also need a district attorney who's going to be fair, who's going to be transparent, who's going to be accountable to the people of Suffolk County. We also need a district attorney who knows the difference between that young man and woman who needs a second chance and someone, yes, that is a violent individual who needs to go to prison. I will be that district attorney. I am the only candidate here with a record of reforming criminal justice. That fact will not change. For the past 4 years, I've led the fight to reform the system against mandatory minimums, against violence that happens in our community, for youth jobs, to increase funding for youth jobs and things like that. So for me, this is a personal fight. This is a personal fight because I live and I see the evidence of mass incarceration for my community. I believe I have the leadership, the values, and experience to be the next district attorney, which is why today I'm releasing a vision into what I expect to accomplish as the next DA. And I ask all of you to go to www.evangelcavallo and see some of my staff that are here with the table to get my thoughts on what it is that I want to accomplish. Thank you for being here. I ask for your vote on September 4th. Thank you.
So I would like to just thank again our candidates for their time, for their willingness to put themselves forward for this position, and for their thoughtful responses. I also like to thank the community because, one thing that people always talk about is public safety. But public safety is a broad statement, but I believe it has at least two components. It is the DA's job to protect the community from those that will perpetrate a crime, but it's also the DA's job to protect your constitutional rights and fundamental fairness. And that is a difficult balance that we need to hold every candidate to in this election. And so with that, I'll invite the candidates to leave the stage, and I'll invite Tanisha Sullivan and Rasan Hall up to the stage for closing our statements.
Okay, before our moderators leave the stage, I do want to take a moment, please take a moment and thank Tavares Brewington, Stephanie Tabashnek, Katora Brewster, and Kevin Kiami for being our guides today. And also, again, want to thank all of the candidates. This is tough. This is hard to do. So we appreciate their time and appreciate your time as well. Before you leave, as we mentioned earlier, this is probably one of the most important critical elections that any of us will have the opportunity or have had the opportunity to vote in quite a little while, maybe 18 months or so. And so I do want to give us an opportunity to hear from an individual who is really a force behind the movement and trying to make sure that communities across the Commonwealth are very well educated about the role of the district attorney. This is not a popularity contest, okay? The stakes are entirely too high for that. So we want to make sure that the information that our communities have about the critical role of the district attorney is shared across communities. And there's no other person in the Commonwealth who's doing that work harder with more persistence than Rasan Hall with the ACLU. Rasan.
Thank you, Tanisha. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rasan Hall. I'm from the American Civil Liberties Union, and although it was mentioned we were not co-sponsors of this evening's event, but we're very supportive because this is what democracy is about. We're so glad that organizations are reaching out to the candidates to have them show and prove, to really talk about what they're going to do, because as you may know, our campaign is called What a Difference a DA Makes. Look at your neighbor and say, what a difference a DA makes. Look at your other neighbor and say, what a difference a DA makes. Now I'll be around to pass the collection plate later, but seriously, you've had an opportunity to evaluate the candidates, and this is one of many opportunities to evaluate the candidates, because you get to hear what they say about every aspect of the system that district attorneys are responsible and involved in, from charging decisions and bail requests to sentencing recommendations to what type of information is turned over in the discovery process, how they treat victims and witnesses of crimes, how they treat defendants or people who are accused of crimes, how are they treating women in the system, how are they treating people who have undocumented status, and what is their commitment to racial justice and reducing racial disparities in the system, transparency, accountability. These are the values that you need to be evaluating the district attorneys on. How are they going to implement these changes? How are they going to change and transform the role of district attorney? It's not just about tweaking and reforming, but it's about systematically changing and reducing this power and influence and giving it back to the community. So thank you all for all of your community support. The What a Difference a DA Makes campaign is comprised of a lot of organizations that include the NAACP, Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, EPICA, Families for Justice's Healing, Mass Bail Fund, and too many others to list right now. If you go to our website, dadifference.org, you can learn a lot more. June 7th, there'll be another debate before the candidates. I hope to see you all there at the historic Hibernian Hall. Thank you for turning out. Thank you to the NAACP and JP Progressives.
All right, thank you, everyone. Just one more thing before we leave. My name is Will Poff-Webster. I'm the co-chair of the Jamaica Plain Progressives. I'd like to acknowledge our state rep, Liz Malia, who's here in the back. And if you are still here, that means you probably have some questions you still want to hear answered about criminal justice reform. Well, the good news is this is not the end. If you go on Slido.com and type in B305, that's SLIDO.com, B305, you can vote on questions that were not answered today. You can add more questions, and we will send those to the candidates, and the NAACP and JP Progressives will post those online so you can get more answers. Finally, Jamaica Plain Progressives is an activist organization. We believe that people who show up have the right to help make the decision on who we endorse in this and every race. And so we're having events coming up where you can become a member and you can get involved. On Saturday, April 14th at 10 a.m. at 10 Driftwood Road, we're going to be canvassing for Katie Ford, who's our endorsed candidate for Register of Deeds. On Monday, April 16th at 6:30 p.m. at First Baptist Church, we're going to have a community conversation with Ayanna Presley, who's our candidate for Congress. And then on June 5th at 6:30 p.m. at Doyle's, we're going to have a discussion on this race, the district attorney's race, where you can give your thoughts on who Jamaica Plain Progressive should endorse in this race. Don't forget, the election is September 4th. We want to see you there. Kevin will be there for his first vote, so you should be there too. Thank you so much for coming out, everyone.